What drives a species to leave the land of its birth and walk into the unknown? Was it hunger, curiosity, or something deeper, an ancient instinct that told our ancestors to keep moving, no matter the cost? 50,000 years ago, in the heart of the Middle East, a new kind of human was crossing the threshold of the world, Homo sapiens. They had journeyed north from Africa only a few thousand years earlier, following rivers and herds through the Levant corridor, a narrow green passage connecting Africa to Eurasia. Here, in what is now Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, the land was wild and alive. Herds of gazelle thundered across dry plains, ancient bison grazed near rivers, and in the shadows, the cave lion, the largest predator of its time, stalked unseen. But this new world was unforgiving. One wrong step could mean extinction. The world, 50,000 years ago, was not as dry as it is today. Rivers once carved their way through green valleys, and the wines of the Levant carried the scent of life, grass, water, and the promise of survival. Across this land, small bands of Homo sapiens, no more than 40 souls, journeyed together. They moved with the seasons, following herds, chasing rain. Every footstep through the sand was a step away from Africa and toward the unknown. Their hands shaped the world as they traveled. In the caves of Kevara and Skull, archaeologists would one day find their tools, blades carved through the Levallois technique, sharp, deliberate, and ahead of their time. These weren't just weapons, they were symbols of thought, of a mind that could plan, imagine, and create. Life was built on balance. Men hunted beneath the blazing sun, silent, patient shadows among the rocks. Women gathered roots and berries, keepers of knowledge about every plant that could heal or harm. And when they met at dusk, under the glow of the fire, they shared meat, not just for hunger, but as a ritual of trust and unity. Children laughed beside the flames. A small wolf pup nuzzled one of them, perhaps the first spark of a bond that would change both species forever. Overhead, the stars stretched endlessly, the same stars that guided their path. As herds of gazelle moved north, the tribe rose to follow. Their leader watched from the ridge, eyes fixed on the horizon. Beyond those valleys lay new rivers, new lands, and new encounters that would test what it truly meant to be human. The world was changing. Rains returned to lands once barren, carving new rivers through the stone. Across these green corridors, the ancestors of modern humans, Homo sapiens, moved north, step by step, chasing the rhythm of the earth itself. Some followed the great herds, others followed the storms. All were driven by a single force: survival. They crossed the rugged spine of the ancient mountains, where one misstep could mean the end of a life. Lightning split the sky, rain fell in sheets, and they huddled beneath cliffs, small and fragile beneath the fury of nature. Yet even there, amid thunder and fear, a spark endured. They were learning to build, to adapt, using fallen trees to craft crude wooden rafts, wrapping themselves in animal hides to keep out the chill. Then came the sea, the endless blue frontier of the Mediterranean. Their boats drifted upon it like leaves in a storm, voices rising in the wind as waves broke over their shoulders. For every child clutching their mother's arm, there was a heart that refused to turn back. After days of wind and salt, the survivors reached the shores of Anatolia, the ancient gateway to Europe. Before them stretched green hills and herds of bison, fat from the spring rains. Here, the sapiens would hunt together, move as one, and share the victory of life over the void. As the sun set, smoke curled about their campfires. They carved stories into stone, strung shells and bones into ornaments, symbols of identity, of memory. Each mark, each beat, was more than decoration. It was proof of something new awakening inside them. Imagination. That night, they celebrated not just a hunt,
truly a victory night,
but the knowledge that they could cross mountains, outlast storms, and conquer the sea. Humanity had taken another step, from wanderers to dreamers of worlds beyond the horizon. Winter was unlike anything they had ever known. When the first bands of Homo sapiens stepped into Europe around 47,000 years ago, they entered a world carved by ice and silence. Snow blanketed the Balkan forests and the Italian plains. Breath froze in the air. Every heartbeat was a reminder of how far they were from the warmth of Africa. They wrapped themselves in animal hides, clung to the fire, and learned to fight the cold with their hands and their minds. But this frozen land was not empty. Here lived another kind of human, the Neanderthal. They had thrived in Europe for hundreds of thousands of years. Shorter, broader, stronger, their bodies were built for this climate. To the newcomers, they were both familiar and alien, mirrors from another path of evolution. Over time, encounters like these would ripple through generations. Some led to conflict, brutal, silent struggles in the snow. Others led to something far more enduring. Genetic evidence tells us that between 50,000 and 45,000 years ago, Sapiens and Neanderthals not only met, they shared blood. For a moment, the forest held its breath. Spears were raised, eyes narrowed, territory, food, survival, everything hung on the edge of a decision. Then, something unexpected. A child stumbled, a Neanderthal hand reached out. And in that fragile moment, the ice began to thaw. Today, if you are of European or Asian descent, 1 to 2% of your DNA carries their story. Fragments of ancient immune defenses, traces in your skin, echoes in your cells. It is a reminder that the human story is not one lineage, but many, braided together in the cold heart of prehistory. And it began with a fire in the snow and a single hand reaching out. The Ice Age had arrived, a world locked in frost and silence. Between 50,000 and 11,000 years ago, Homo Sapiens faced their greatest trial yet, survival in the grip of endless winter. Storms swept across Europe, driving them into caves for shelter. Inside the darkness, fire became more than warmth. It became memory, light, and meaning. Upon stone walls, they painted bison, reindeer, and lions, visions of the life they fought to preserve. In places like Chauvet and Lascaux, these images still whisper across 40 millennia, proof that the human mind could dream even when the world froze. They learned to sew hides into clothing, to sharpen blades with purpose, to share food through long, hungry nights. Unlike the Neanderthals, they built vast networks, families, allies, and distant groups bound by trade and trust. That connection became their strength, their invisible weapon against extinction. Outside, danger never slept. When the roar of a cave bear echoed through the storm, Sapiens stood shoulder to shoulder, even beside the last of the Neanderthals. Firelight flickered across their faces as spears struck, snow lifted, and the ancient battle for survival burned again beneath the frozen sky. From these fires, humanity was reborn. By 40,000 years ago, the last of the Neanderthals had vanished into the snow. Only Homo Sapiens remained, masters of fire, art, and memory. They filled the empty lands with stories, painted their dreams on stone, and built the first chapters of what would become us. In their faces, we would know our own, their courage, their fear, their hope, still written in our blood. Every sunrise, every heartbeat, every act of creation is their legacy living on. This was the moment humanity began its reign. If you felt their journey, their struggle, their wonder, subscribe and follow the next episode of Life 50,000 Years Ago, where the story of us continues.